well, big picture view of the dialogue, right? That starts off. And you can kind of walk through the code here. And this is where all the interactions happen. If you pick cast, then we are going to search based on cast. If you pick genre, then we'll pick search based on genre. And if you pick language, etc., and so on and so forth, right? And then if you see here, this is what we are asking for the confirmation, just to kind of demonstrate that it is a multi-turn bot. So whenever you ask for the step context, will give you the actual answer the user had given you, right? And depending on what the person has picked, you can actually get a found choice object, and then you can get the value back, right? So this is kind of all the top level interaction that happens in the bot, and this is how you return back. And everything that returns back is usually a completable feature of dialog time result. Because most of these methods always give you dialog time results back. Right? So that is pretty much it, And then what we are doing here is now we are trying to go in here to search movies. That is our actual backend, which talks to the cognitive search. So search movies is going to search for the movies, and then if you click on this method, it will basically go there, right? So this is our implementation of cognitive search. So this is going to take data like load data from this properties file. The properties file basically contains like an authentication key. So if you see, there's a search service name, the HTTP endpoint that we have to connect to do the query, and the search service query key. So whenever it comes to the search piece, there are two keys. One is an admin key, and the other one is a query key. So we have to make sure that we are just using the query key because we're just querying the data. And then afterwards, I'll show you the place where we actually create the index and load the data. That is an admin operation. That's where we need to use the admin key, right? So very simple code. It's very straightforward. It connects to the endpoint, and then if you kind of look back here, you will see this is the search endpoint. So if you go back to the resource group here, if you go to the cognitive search, this is basically our endpoint, right? So this is the URL of the back endpoint, and if you go to keys here, this is where the key will be, right? You can copy one of these keys. This is a primary admin key and secondary admin key, and then you have a query key, like which is in the bottom here. It's kind of difficult to see, but there's a key here. Let me minus here. If you see, there's a key right here, which is the query key, right? And those are the ones which you have actually put in the code. So all that is this is doing is basically getting the search endpoint, getting the search service name, and getting the service key, and then builds a client using all of this, right? And it's Azure credential, of course, build a client. Then we set up the search options object, and that is the one which tells you how many results you want to get. So if you want to get more results, you can set it up as that. But if you want to get less results, of course, you can reduce it. And this is what we fire a search from using the search client, whatever the text the user had input, right? Search text data, and we're going to fire it. So once you fire that text search, it's actually going to give you a pageable result. We iterate to the pageable results, and then we create a data transfer object. So this is the movie DTO that communicates back the data into the Spring Boot thing. So it's going to create a new DTO. It's going to get all these things, and it's going to put all this and return back the DTO, right? So that is pretty much all that is happening here. And then one more trick we do is like to get all the options that are there for searching. We use what is known as a facet. A facet is nothing but like um, what are the options available for a particular field, right? So in our case, you can see cast. When you facet on cast or language or genres or keywords, what it is doing is it's basically going to the index and getting back the list of available options directly from the index. So that is kind of what you see here when you go to this website, right? It comes in here. So this is like, let's say, cast, right? When I click on the cast, these options that pop up here are nothing but facets. So what we do is to just not put a lot of load on the engine for every user. We cache these facets on startup. So if you kind of go back to the code here, if you go to the movie search dialog, here is where you can kind of see on the startup, of this, we actually create this facets. We get the facets, right? So those facets are actually stored in string. Like for cast, these are the options. For language, these are the options. We keep that in the map of string list, right? So that's what is happening here. So we're just going to get that list. It's going to run the same query. It's going to ask for these things to be faceted, and it's going to search for everything, right? Because you want to get everything, and then it's going to add this value and then give it back the data, right? So that is pretty much the entire integration from your bot to the endpoint to the cognitive search index, right? So that is pretty much what we can kind of see very quickly. And the other thing I want to kind of show you here is the palm integration, right? So there's a palm integration that we can actually do. So you build your normal Spring Boot application, right? So when you build your Spring Boot application and then you want to make it deployable on Azure, so what we can do is actually run this command. So this is doing like a configuration section on your Spring Boot POM XML file. So if you kind of go towards the bottom here, that's where you see the actual packaging sections that Azure has added, right? The plugin has added. So it'll put in a plugin area here. So one of the things I observed is this: it puts a older version and then it causes problems. But best thing is to update this to the latest version that you can find on the Maven, right? And none of these and this is where it it asks for like what is your subscription ID, what is your resource group, etc. You need to fill out all of that, and then that is where it persists it. Another thing I observed is it also needs Java 11 whenever you're trying to push like Spring Boot. Java 8 also works, but I've had better success with Java 11. And then unit also creates a bunch of property entries at the top, right? So this one, so you can pass them as parameters like this bot name and the group name, or you can set it up as hard coded for now, right? So that is pretty much what I have done here. Then all you need to do is execute these commands, right? So that is one time. This Maven configuration is one time. Then all you need to do is you need to do Maven clean package if you want to do it and test locally, and then you do this Azure Web App deploy. So that will basically push that into the application service plan and application thing, right? So that is the end-to-end kind of what happens. So this is another piece that I kind of briefly touched upon. So whenever you create a bot, you need to kind of create an application registration inside the Azure Active Directory. So if you go back to this portal and then you type in AAD, you can kind of see that it will go ahead and create an application registration. So whenever you come here, right, so you can see an application registration. So I have created a lot of bots. So this is pretty much what your bot is, right? So it creates a, for this particular bot, this is the registration. So how do we create it? You can of course come and create it here, but the easier way to do it is through the command line interface. Once you have the AZ SDK kind of CLI installed, so all you do is you create an application registration, and this is what you have to pass. It's in the documentation for a Spring Boot app. This is what you need to pass as input, and then you reset the credentials, because when you create this, it will have a password. You can't see it. You can reset the credentials, and then you'll get the username and the password, right? And that you need to remember the application ID and the password. And that is what you basically set in two places. One place is here, the properties, application properties. This is where you need to set the application ID and password. This will go away, so I don't care if you see the credential. So this is the app ID password. That's where you set it up. And the same password, you need to set it up actually on the bot. I think I showed it before, but I can show this to you really quick here. So if you go back to home and go back to resource group user 64, the MovieLens bot. If you see the MovieLens bot in here in the configuration here, that is where we actually set the key when you create the bot. You can set this like you can click on manage and you can even actually change it. But this is your secret, what we had picked up from the other side. So once you set up all that, that's where the tricky part is. And I have another video where I'll show you all the different ways you can debug. But that is pretty much your end-to-end source code. kind of look at it in more detail when you download it, and you can even build it and try it out. Thank you, and hopefully this was helpful.